Since you don't want to leave, then don't leave now. As Mu Chen's voice echoed through the grand hall, Zhu Yan's face seemed to twitch slightly. He looked up at the massive spirit array outside, swirling with the storm, then turned his gaze back to Mu Chen. That a solemn expression began to form in his eyes. He never expected that the seemingly unremarkable person before him would have such methods. Can you control this spirit array? Zhu Yan asked slowly, his voice betraying an uncontainable ripple of surprise. He simply could not believe that Mu Chen had the ability to control a Grandmaster-level spirit array. Mu Chen lightly tapped the massive stone pillar beside him and said, "This stone pillar happens to be the control center of this grand array. Earlier, I merged a spirit seal into it and temporarily took control. Of course, controlling the spirit array had one prerequisite. Mu Chen had to gain the Wind Mansion Lord's approval. Fortunately, the three of them had previously obtained the Wind Mansion Lord's token. However, Mu Chen chose not to mention this part. He smiled faintly at Zhu Yan and said, "I told you, the one who laughs last might just be the lucky one, and my luck has always been quite good. Now, can you return what belongs to us?" Mu Chen extended his hand toward Zhu Yan with a gentle smile. Zhu Yan stared at Mu Chen. After a long pause, he sighed and said seriously, "This time, it was my mistake. I shouldn't have let you touch that stone pillar." If he had noticed earlier, perhaps he could have forced Mu Chen back. As long as Mu Chen left the stone pillar, the current crisis would be resolved. Mu Chen smiled but said nothing, his gaze still sharp as a blade, never relaxing. Zhu Yan shrugged his shoulders and said, "The situation is indeed a bit unfavorable for me right now, but..." At this moment, his eyes suddenly sharpened, and he continued, "The things in my hands, over the years, no one has been able to take them from me." Boom! The moment these words left his mouth, the space behind him suddenly warped, and the Supreme Sea flickered into view. However, in the Supreme Sea, countless volcanoes erupted, and within the sea, extremely violent spiritual energy began to gather. A terrifying spiritual pressure swept through the air, shaking the very space itself. Zhu Yan stamped his foot, causing magma to burst forth beneath him, and his figure transformed into a streak of fire, shooting up into the sky, aiming to pierce through the spirit array. Clearly, Zhu Yan didn't believe that Mu Chen could fully unleash the power of this Grandmaster-level spirit array. He thought that as long as there was the slightest crack in the array, he could easily escape. Once he left the Grand Hall, he would no longer have any reason to fear Mu Chen. Mu Chen, seeing this, wasn't at all surprised. If Zhu Yan were to surrender so easily, he wouldn't have been the #1 person on the strongest list. However, while Zhu Yan's thinking wasn't wrong, he didn't know that Mu Chen was also a true spirit array master. Though Mu Chen's skills in spirit arrays weren't yet at the Grandmaster level, by utilizing the stone pillar's central control, he was more than capable of controlling a Grandmaster-level spirit array. So, this time, Zhu Yan's plan was bound to fail. That Mu Chen's gaze remained indifferent as he watched the imposing fire streak through the air. He lightly tapped the stone pillar again, and a spirit seal seemed to flow from his palm into the pillar. Whoosh, whoosh. The moment his hand touched the stone pillar, the grand array outside the grand hall roared to life. Deep blue tornado storms, like giant awakened dragons, tore through space and surged toward the fire streak, sweeping everything in their path. The deep blue storms contained terrifying spiritual energy fluctuations. Anyone who came into contact with them, even a peak 9th grade expert, would be shredded to pieces. Zhu Yan, suspended in midair, looked at the approaching tornado storms, and his face changed slightly. He realized the terrifying spiritual energy within those storms. If he wasn't careful, he would be doomed without any chance of survival. Thus, he had no choice but to halt his advance. Like a ghost, he flickered through the air, dodging all the storms. Mu Chen, watching the ghostly figure in the air, was somewhat surprised. This person's strength was indeed formidable. He could even avoid such an onslaught. However, if he thought he could easily avoid a Grandmaster-level spirit array, then he was being rather naive. Boom! Just as a thought flashed through Mu Chen's mind, a strange azure storm suddenly materialized behind Zhu Yan, and like a whip, it lashed down mercilessly. The space behind him shattered continuously, sending a chill through Zhu Yan's body, causing his hair to stand on end. Without hesitation, he waved his sleeve, and an endless torrent of flames erupted from within. The flames were incredibly domineering. Wherever they spread, the very space twisted, and even the air began to burn. Countless flames howled as if they had formed into a fire dragon, crashing head-on into the azure whirlwind storm coming from behind. Boom! The storm and flames exploded in the sky, like a grand fireworks display. The two forces clashed, but the fire dragon held on for only a moment before suddenly shattering, with a trail of wind silently sweeping through the space and slamming heavily into the back of Zhu Yan. Boom! Zhu Yan's body was struck hard, plummeting from the sky. His feet scraped a long mark in the grand hall as he barely managed to stabilize himself. But now he no longer looked as composed as before. A gruesome scar appeared across his back, with magma swirling within, trying to heal the wound. But a violent surge of azure spiritual energy prevented the healing process. Hiss. Feeling the intense pain in his back, Zhu Yan sucked in a cold breath. So this is the power of a Grandmaster-level spirit array. No wonder it could rival an Earth Supreme. If it weren't for his strong physique, he might have been done for. This guy. Zhu Yan furrowed his brows, raising his head to look at Mu Chen, who remained calm not far away. He had truly underestimated him. He hadn't expected this seemingly young man to unleash the full power of this spirit array to such an extent. There wasn't even a single flaw to exploit. It had been years since he'd suffered such a setback. Brother Zhu Yan, can I have the item back now? Mu Chen asked, staring at him with a smile. Zhu Yan remained expressionless, channeling spiritual energy to heal the wound on his back. His mind was racing, trying to find a way to break through. But Mu Chen wasn't going to give him much time. Seeing that Zhu Yan hadn't given up, Mu Chen slapped the stone pillar again, and a massive azure storm descended from the sky, enveloping Zhu Yan like a light ring. Whoosh! The terrifying wind howled around Zhu Yan, its destructive force grinding through space. Countless shards of space mixed into the wind, making it too dangerous to touch. Zhu Yan looked at the storm that now surrounded him like a prison, and his lips twitched. Mu Chen really was cautious, giving him no chance to find a flaw. Once the storm cage was in place, it completely cut off his escape routes, trapping him with no way out. Serves you right for being so arrogant. Lin Jing, witnessing this, couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. This annoying guy dared to come and snatch their food, and his attitude had really gotten on her nerves. She had already planned to use all her trump cards to make him pay today, but she hadn't expected Mu Chen to have such a powerful move up his sleeve. Mu Chen, you're amazing. Excited, Lin Jing slapped Mu Chen's shoulder. However, her slap caused Mu Chen's leg to give way momentarily. He rolled his eyes helplessly. Did she think he had infinite spiritual energy? His spiritual energy had been nearly drained by the azure feather fan earlier, and now he had activated the spirit array. His energy was almost depleted. Seeing the look Mu Chen gave her, Lin Jing couldn't help but chuckle and quickly took out some supreme spiritual liquid to help him recover. Mu Chen took the liquid, replenishing his energy, while his gaze shifted to Zhu Yan, trapped in the storm. Do you have an answer now? Zhu Yan stared at Mu Chen for a moment before turning his gaze away, his face unreadable. You're the first person to make me this embarrassed in years. Then I'm honored. Mu Chen replied indifferently. Zhu Yan's voice was calm as he asked, what are you planning to do now? Return the wind god fan. I'll set up a spirit array. Once we leave, its power will gradually weaken. By then, you can break the array and escape on your own, Mu Chen said with a smile. Zhu Yan furrowed his brow, staring at Mu Chen. His face remained expressionless as he said, why should I trust you? What if you keep me trapped here? You don't seem to have many other choices, Mu Chen replied casually. Besides, I don't think even if I break my word, you'd really stay trapped here forever. Although Mu Chen didn't know much about Zhu Yan, he absolutely didn't believe that the number one person on the strongest list of Tianluo continent would have no trump cards. He probably wasn't using them because the cost was too high. Zhu Yan fell silent. After a long pause, he finally looked at Mu Chen, giving a faint smile. Interesting. I didn't expect someone like you to emerge from the Tianluo continent. This time, even if you win, next time we meet, I'll seek your guidance again. With those words, Zhu Yan hesitated no more. He flicked his finger, and the azure feather fan shot out like a beam of blue light. Mu Chen reached out his hand, and the azure feather fan appeared in his grasp. He held it lightly and twirled it in his hand. "Thank you," he said, eyeing the wrecked grand hall. The azure feather fan hovered in Mu Chen's hand. After reclaiming the wind god fan, he no longer paid attention to Zhu Yan. Instead, he turned to Lin Jing and the nine nether, smiling as he said, "Now it's time to divide the treasures." He raised the wind god fan and said, "Ladies first, feel free to make your move." His smile was carefree. Although the wind god fan was indeed a true sacred artifact, incredibly powerful, he didn't show any reluctance. After all, sacred artifacts weren't new to him. Even the star suppression tower, as strong as it was, he had eventually given to Mandala .9 Nether, and Lin Jing studied the fan for a moment before both shaking their heads. "You've already fought alongside this item. It seems it won't resist you, and if it recognizes a master, you're the most suitable." What they said was not wrong, that Mu Chen had already gained some understanding of the seal technique from the wind god fan, and they had formed a sort of tacit connection that if he wanted to become the fan's master, it probably wouldn't oppose him. Mu Chen smiled helplessly at their response. After a moment of thought, he decided not to be too picky and nodded. Gripping the wind god fan in his hand, he said, "Well then, I'll take a little advantage this time. What about the others?" Mu Chen pointed to the floating azure jade scroll and the spirit pool made of supreme spiritual liquid. "Let's see what they are," Nine Nether said, waving her jade hand. The azure jade scroll floated down and landed in her palm. She closed her eyes to sense it, then opened her beautiful eyes in surprise and said, "It's a scroll of a minor divine ability, called Wind Summoning. It can turn spiritual energy into an endless gale, and even allows one to ride the wind, moving at an incredibly fast speed." If Nine Nether, whose true form was the Nine Nether Soul Sparrow, a divine beast skilled in flight, said it was fast, then the speed must be terrifying. Mu Chen was also somewhat surprised. This divine ability seemed more auxiliary in nature, but compared to some attack-oriented techniques, the value of wind summoning art might actually be higher. After all, mastering this ability would guarantee one's safety. If faced with a tricky enemy, even if one couldn't defeat them, they could always retreat unharmed, leaving their opponents helpless. Mu Chen estimated that if he practiced it, he could even escape from a lower Earth Supreme without trouble. This was indeed a treasure. However, since he already had the wind god fan, Mu Chen wasn't particularly coveting the wind summoning art. Instead, he left it for the two women to decide. A divine ability meant for escaping? How pathetic, Lin Jing pouted. Clearly not interested in it. .9 Nether smiled gratefully at Lin Jing. She knew Lin Jing was being modest, but right now, among the three of them, she was the one most suited to the wind summoning art. With this technique, her speed would increase to an astonishing degree, far surpassing even Mu Chen. "Then I won't be polite," Nine Nether said with a smile, gripping the wind summoning art scroll in her hand. "Then this spirit pool is mine," Lin Jing said with a slight smile. She flicked her finger, and the frost spirit puppet immediately shot out. With its ice-cold longsword, it began to carefully carve out the spirit pool. In the end, Lin Jing waved her hand, collecting the entire pool. If refined, that spirit pool could yield tens of millions of supreme spiritual liquid. That's no small amount. In the Great Thousand Worlds, it would likely be enough to buy a divine ability technique. All in all, it's not a bad deal. Once the spoils were divided, Mu Chen nodded in satisfaction. This time, they had all made a significant profit. Truly, no one was left empty-handed. Thinking of this, Mu Chen couldn't help but glance at Zhu Yan, still trapped in the storm. If it weren't for this guy barging in, everything would have been perfect. "Let's leave," Mu Chen said. Looking at the now empty grand hall, there was no need to stay any longer. Everything of value had already been taken. Zhu Yu and Lin Jing had no objections and nodded in agreement at that moment. Zhu Yan, seated cross-legged in the storm, had his eyes lightly closed. He paid no attention to Mu Chen and the others dividing the spoils. Seeing this, Mu Chen didn't bother with him either. He led Zhu Yu and Lin Jing out of the grand hall, and their figures quickly disappeared into the ripples of the light barrier. After they left, Zhu Yan slowly opened his eyes. His fiery red gaze followed the spot where Mu Chen and the others had vanished. and a faint smile appeared on his lips. Mu Chen. Huh. What an interesting guy. We'll meet again. When that time comes, I'll make sure to get back what I lost here. I hope you won't disappoint me then. Outside the Wind Mansion's grand hall, the storm formation surrounding the hall suddenly cracked open. Through the gap, 3 figures slowly stepped out, and once they were clear, the storm formation quickly closed again. At this moment, the island where the Wind Mansion was located had clearly been discovered by many forces. The sound of wind tearing through the air echoed as people searched everywhere for treasure. From time to time, excited cheers could be heard, indicating that some fortunate individuals had found treasures left behind by the ancient heavenly palace. Around the main hall, there were naturally some forces watching. However, they dared not approach recklessly due to the terrifying spirit array outside the hall. So, when Mu Chen and the others stepped out, all the gazes of the onlookers immediately turned toward them. Soon, greed appeared in their eyes. It was obvious that there must be treasures inside the grand hall, and if these 3 could come and go freely, the treasures had to have fallen into their hands. Swish! Just as their greed grew, a cold flash suddenly swept across, and an overwhelming chill spread, causing the very earth beneath them to freeze in layers of ice. The onlookers froze in terror, hastily scrambling to avoid the cold light. They stared in shock at the figure of a spirit puppet, now appearing before Mu Chen and the others, its body radiating an astonishing spiritual power. A peak 9th grade spirit puppet. The onlookers exchanged glances, all shocked. They quickly retreated. A force capable of summoning such a high-level spirit puppet was not something they could afford to provoke. These guys really have sharp noses. Mu Chen observed the figures flying above the island, sighing. It hadn't been long since they entered, yet the Wind Mansion Island had already attracted so many people. Fortunately, the greatest treasure of the Wind Mansion was already in their hands. The only downside was that it seemed he had made an enemy of Xun'er. Mu Chen couldn't help but grimace. Jiu Yu, noticing his expression, understood what was on his mind. She couldn't help but laugh softly. It seems that the top 4 on the Tianluo continent's strongest list are not exactly friendly toward you. You really know how to stir up trouble. Mu Chen laughed self-deprecatingly when he heard her words, realizing how true they were. He had severed Xia Hong's arm, and Xia Yu would likely hold a grudge. The 3rd-ranked Calavera was a major enemy he couldn't avoid this time. The only one who hadn't clearly shown hostility was Su Qingyin, but she was a temperamental person. And now, he had just made the 1st-ranked Zhu Yan an enemy. These lords, for an ordinary person, offending even one would mean constant fear and anxiety. Yet, he had nearly offended all of them, and his ability to stir up trouble was something even Mu Chen admired a little. However, despite his helplessness in this matter, Mu Chen had no regrets. Take Zhu Yan, for example. If given another chance, Mu Chen would still act without hesitation. Over the years, as he advanced in cultivation, he had offended many powerful figures. Yet, in the end, it was he who had the last laugh, leaving those past opponents far behind. This was true in the past, and Mu Chen believed it would remain the same in the future. With this thought, Mu Chen couldn't help but smile faintly. Gone was the worry and caution from his face, replaced instead by sharp, sword-like confidence that on the path of the strong, if you no longer believe in yourself, there's no need to continue. Let's go. We should find a place to rest for a while. Mu Chen turned to the 2 women and said. After the previous battle, his spiritual energy had been severely depleted, and he was in a poor state he needed to recover. Moreover, the wind god fan he had just obtained also required initial refining to avoid it being easily snatched away. Jiu Yu nodded in agreement, as she also wanted to comprehend the wind summoning art she had just received. Lin Jing, upon seeing this, naturally had no objections. The 3 of them swiftly left Wind Mansion Island, searching for a secluded small island. This island was devoid of any spirit arrays and was as ordinary as could be, making it highly unlikely anyone would actively come searching for it. Mu Chen and the others landed on this small island and found a dilapidated stone tower. Inside the stone tower, Mu Chen immediately sat down and habitually set up a small spiritual array for protection. Once done, he took a deep breath and clenched his palm, causing the azure feather fan to appear in his hand. Mu Chen gazed at the fan, his eyes gradually growing more intense with excitement. This was the second true sacred artifact he had obtained since the Star Suppression Tower. Though the Wind God Fan's rank seemed to be lower than the Star Suppression Tower, Chen wasn't surprised. After all, the Star Suppression Tower had been left behind by the Fourth Hall Master, whereas the Wind God Fan had been left by the Wind Mansion Lord. Their statuses within the ancient Heavenly Palace were vastly different. Yet, precisely because of this, Chen felt a strange sense of joy. Until he truly broke through to Earth Supreme, having an excessively powerful sacred artifact in his hands would only be a waste. On the other hand, with his current strength, Chen believed he could barely control the Wind God Fan. With that thought, Chen didn't hesitate any longer. Spiritual energy surged from his palm, blazing like flames, gradually enveloping the Wind God Fan. The fiery spiritual energy quickly engulfed the Azure Feather Fan, and the intense heat caused the surrounding space to warp. Even the air carried the scent of something being scorched. However, in the face of this searing spiritual fire, the fan remained still. Not even the faintest shimmer of azure light disturbed. It seemed to treat the flames as though they were nothing. That Chen, however, appeared completely calm. If a sacred artifact could be refined so easily, he would doubt its authenticity. Moreover, if the Wind God Fan wasn't currently ownerless, Chen doubted he could have dared to refine it so directly. The fan would probably have fought back instantly. He focused on the Wind God Fan, and with a wave of his sleeve, a torrent of supreme spiritual liquid appeared around him, and vast spiritual mist began to rise, filling the floor of the stone tower. Refining the Wind God Fan would clearly take more than just a moment, so Chen took out a large amount of supreme spiritual liquid, preparing to use its power to gradually complete the refinement. Once everything was set up, Chen slowly closed his eyes. Streams of spiritual energy, formed from the supreme spiritual liquid, flowed toward him, entering his body through his breath, constantly replenishing his depleted spiritual energy. Time passed quietly as the refinement continued at a slow pace. After an unknown period, the torrent of supreme spiritual liquid around Chen began to dwindle at the same time. The Wind God Fan, enveloped by the spiritual flames, seemed to become somewhat blurry. Faint mist rose from the center of the fan, and within it, a small, deep azure vortex began to appear. The tiny vortex was exquisitely delicate, and when it materialized, the space seemed to tremble. In the distance, the wind howled, and sand and stones began to swirl in the sky. Chen's tightly shut eyes finally opened at this moment. He gazed at the small whirlwind that appeared in the Wind God Fan, a trace of joy flickering in his eyes. This whirlwind was the core of the Wind God Fan, a strand of the primordial yellow gale, born after tens of thousands of years in the skies above. The reason the Wind God Fan could be considered a true sacred artifact was because of this rare and precious gale. As its core material, truly refine the Wind God Fan. One must imprint their own mark into this strand of the primordial yellow gale. Taking a deep breath, Chen bit the tip of his tongue, and instantly, a jet of essence blood shot out. This essence blood contained highly concentrated spiritual energy. As it spilled out, Chen's face immediately turned pale, clearly feeling the immense toll it had taken on him. This essence blood, nourished by his own spiritual energy, was incredibly precious. If he lost too much, it could even damage his spiritual foundation. Had it not been for the need to refine a true sacred artifact, Chen would have never been willing to part with it. The essence blood shot out and fell towards the primordial yellow gale within the Wind God Fan. But it didn't merge immediately. It merely hovered on the surface, as if some kind of resistance was preventing the blood from integrating. Chen remained calm. He closed his eyes again and began to channel his spiritual energy, releasing fiery heat to gradually scorch the gale. Under this slow, intense heat, the essence blood floating above the gale slowly began to blend in. It would take some time, so Chen wasn't in a hurry. He waited patiently. Once the essence blood fully merged with the gale and left its imprint, the Wind God Fan would truly belong to him. Even if someone tried to forcibly take it, unless their strength was several levels above his, it would be incredibly difficult to erase his blood imprint. In fact, if pushed to the limit, Chen could activate his blood imprint, and cause the wind god fan to self-destruct. The power of such an explosion would be enough to make even a true Earth Supreme think twice. This was why Chen was willing to spend time and energy refining the wind god fan now. The allure of sacred artifacts was simply too great. Now that all the necessary steps were in place, he just had to wait patiently. While Chen was refining the wind god fan, on the other side of the stone tower, Jiuyu stood in midair. She stood still in the sky, her eyes slightly closed, with not a trace of spiritual energy fluctuations around her. She stretched out her long arms, quietly focusing on the wind summoning art's mental formula that she quietly meditated. Strands of wind seemed to begin condensing in the sky, gradually gathering around her. With the gathering of these winds, Jiuyu felt her body becoming lighter, as if she could truly soar through the skies. Like an all-pervading breeze that a ripple of excitement stirred in her heart. Though the wind summoning art was merely a minor divine ability, mostly used for support, its profoundness was astonishing. If she could truly master it, her speed would be unmatched, even by a true Earth Supreme at for those below the Earth Supreme. Even a powerhouse like Zhu Yan would only be left eating dust behind her, unable to even touch her shadow. Thinking of that moment, Jiuyu couldn't help but feel a surge of anticipation. While Chen and Jiuyu were busy refining their skills, Lin Jing, by comparison, seemed rather bored. After walking around the small island and finding nothing of value, she returned in disappointment. Upon seeing Chen and Jiuyu immersed in their intense training and unwilling to disturb them, Lin Jing quietly left the small island. She figured she might as well take the opportunity to explore the area, hoping to stumble upon another fortuitous encounter. Lin Jing wandered aimlessly after, leaving the small island. Along the way, she encountered numerous groups of people. Seeing a lone young woman traveling by herself, some harbored ill intentions. However, just as such thoughts arose, they noticed a figure shrouded in an icy aura, silently trailing behind her like a ghost. The chilling presence emanating from that figure sent a shudder through their hearts, instantly freezing any reckless ideas they had point one by one. They stepped aside, avoiding her path. Under the protection of the frost spirit puppet, Lin Jing moved unhindered. No one dared to trouble her, allowing her to explore several stone islands freely and collect some gains. However, compared to when she was with Chen, her findings seemed rather lackluster. She wasn't satisfied. Her standards were high, and ordinary treasures rarely piqued her interest. This current haul was hardly enough to excite her. Fortunately, she did manage to obtain some valuable intelligence during her search, information about the location of Dragon Mansion. Dragon Mansion was one of the 9 mansions, and its mansion master was said to be among the strongest of them all, surpassing even the Wind Mansion Lord whom Chen and his companions had previously encountered. The moment Lin Jing learned of this, she changed her course without hesitation, heading straight for Dragon Mansion Island. Upon arrival, she was momentarily taken aback. The entire area outside the island was swarming with people, and in the distance, streaks of light kept flashing across the sky as more figures rushed over. It was clear that news had spread, drawing people from all directions. Compared to when they had infiltrated Wind Island, this place was far livelier. However, despite the crowd, Lin Jing noticed that no one dared to enter the island outright. Instead, they lingered on the outskirts, hesitant to advance. Hovering in midair, Lin Jing swept her gaze across the scene and soon understood why a faint mist permeated the massive stone island. Seemingly harmless at first glance, but she immediately recognized it. Dragon breath poison. No wonder no one dares to enter. Lin Jing clicked her tongue in admiration. This so-called dragon breath poison was an extremely potent toxin refined from a dragon's breath. Its power was overwhelming. If even a lower Earth Supreme inhaled too much, they would be left in a pitiful state. For those below that level, a single misstep could mean instant death. Yet, Lin Jing was not the least bit discouraged. Instead, a slight smile played on her lips. While this venom might deter others, it wasn't nearly enough to stop her. With that thought, she waved her hand, retrieving the frost spirit puppet. Then, she clenched her delicate fingers, and a finely crafted white jade gourd appeared in her palm. That a translucent jade. Having prepared herself, she strode forward confidently, ignoring the stunned gazes around her as she walked directly onto the island. That same moment, on the opposite side of Dragon Island, another graceful figure made her entrance, moving at an unhurried pace. She wore a colorful dress, her long, wavy hair exuding a mesmerizing charm. Her slender waist swayed like a serpent's, evoking an irresistible allure. Though a sheer veil obscured her face, the faint outline of her breathtaking features was enough to captivate anyone who laid eyes on her. Everything about her exuded an enchanting and mysterious aura, leaving those who saw her utterly spellbound. As she stepped onto Dragon Island, a small, colorful snake slithered out from her shoulder. It opened its mouth and effortlessly inhaled the dragon breath poison lingering in the air. The deadly toxin, so potent that even dragons avoided it, had no effect on the tiny serpent, with the little snake absorbing the poison, the enchanting woman in the colorful dress gracefully made her way deeper into the stone island. Above the vast floating island, ruins stretched as far as the eye could see. A faint mist lingered between heaven and earth, casting an eerie stillness over the desolate landscape. There was no sign of life, only the oppressive silence of a dead zone. Rustle. Amid the eerie stillness, faint footsteps echoed softly. A lively, energetic figure skipped along, her presence a stark contrast to the desolation around her. She leaped onto a massive boulder, shielding her eyes with one hand as she scanned the distance. Yet, the overwhelming silence made her pout, her soft lips curving in mild disappointment. Having walked so far, yet encountering nothing, Lin Jing mumbled to herself. Her body was covered with a thin layer of light film, which blocked the toxic mist that filled the air, shielding her from its effects. This dragon island was clearly much larger than the wind island they had encountered before, and the mist obscured their senses, forcing them to search step by step. However, Lin Jing had found nothing after such a long search. It seems I'll have to try a different method, Lin Jing sighed. Then, she clenched her jade-like hand, and a beam of light gathered in her palm. Soon, a flying insect, about the size of a baby's fist, appeared. Its head had long antennae that swayed constantly. This was a rare, treasure-hunting insect, capable of sensing subtle vibrations in the environment even in harsh conditions, and could even find treasures buried deep beneath the earth. However, in an environment thick with toxic mist, though, the treasure-hunting insect could still detect things. There was a risk it might be harmed by the poison. Lin Jing had refrained from using it earlier, but seeing the situation now, if she didn't, she would waste even more time. Go, she said. Lin Jing raised her hand, and the insect took flight, circling briefly before heading to the right. Lin Jing quickly followed behind. The insect flew for about 10 minutes before landing on the ruins of a building. Lin Jing carefully picked it up, noticing that its body had begun to darken, a result of the toxic gas corroding it. Thank you, she whispered, gently patting the insect. Taking out a jade bottle filled with a liquid that had purifying properties, she placed the insect inside, hoping it would gradually heal. After doing this, Lin Jing finally looked up. Her clear and lively eyes gazed into the distance, and a hint of joy appeared in them. In the distance lay a vast expanse of ruins. From the remains, it was clear that once there had been a grand palace here, but now it had collapsed into nothingness. Lin Jing's gaze swept briefly across the ruins before fixing on the center. There, a still intact skeletal throne stood quietly. The oppressive aura emanating from it suggested that, in ancient times, a powerful figure must have once sat there. However, Lin Jing merely glanced at the throne before looking upward, her eyes narrowing as they locked onto the top. There, she saw a crystal light orb, about the size of a human head. The orb was smooth and emitted a soft glow. Inside, a white dragon coiled around it, and a vast wave of spiritual energy radiated from it. Is this the dragon spirit pearl? Lin Jing's eyes lit up as she looked at the orb containing the white dragon. It was said that powerful dragon clans could seal their spiritual power upon death, condensing it into a dragon spirit pearl. This pearl contained their purest spiritual energy and even bloodline power. If one could obtain and refine it, it would be extremely beneficial for cultivation. Based on Lin Jing's estimation, this dragon spirit pearl must have been left behind by the Dragon Mansion Lord. That figure had been almost as powerful as an Upper Earth Supreme, even stronger than the Wind Mansion Lord. Therefore, the value of this Dragon Spirit Pearl might not be less than the Wind God fan that Mu Chun had obtained. Finally, something good. Lin Jing smiled, thrilled after a long search, as she spotted a valuable treasure. With the treasure in sight, there was no hesitation. She flicked her finger, and a spiritual energy beam shot out, aimed at the Dragon Spirit Pearl to seize it. Swish. However, just as Lin Jing was about to take the pearl, a streak of colorful spiritual energy whizzed down from the sky. With a flick, it shattered the spiritual energy beam she had just sent out. Who? The sudden attack startled Lin Jing. She immediately shouted coldly. Her voice echoed, but the area remained eerily silent, as if the scene had been a mere illusion. You think I can't find you just because you're hiding? Lin Jing sneered, then quickly formed a seal with her delicate fingers. She pressed it down forcefully into the void in front of her. Instantly, dazzling jade light spread from her palm at an incredible speed. The jade light spread out, and the poisonous mist that had enveloped the area quickly began to recede. The jade light seemed to have the power to pierce through all hidden things, sweeping away even the shadows in the process. As the jade light spread rapidly, Lin Jing saw a slight fluctuation in the space on a distant rock, and a figure gradually appeared under the illumination of the jade light. Lin Jing stared at the graceful figure that emerged, her delicate face momentarily frozen in surprise. She realized that the person who appeared was an exceptionally beautiful woman, with captivating charm. Who are you? Lin Jing asked, her gaze fixed on the enchanting woman in the colorful dress. What's this? Do I need to introduce myself just to search for treasure here? The woman in the colorful dress smiled lazily. Though her cheeks were veiled with a thin gauze, it was still enough to imagine the stunning smile hidden beneath. Lin Jing's face remained calm as she responded indifferently. I found this Dragon Spirit Pearl first. When did the rules here change to first come, first served? The woman's melodious voice carried a hint of teasing, clearly finding Lin Jing's words somewhat amusing. Lin Jing shrugged her fragrant shoulders. Her beauty was striking, though her demeanor was quite different from the woman in the colorful dress, making her movement unexpectedly graceful. Then, I guess there's nothing more to say. The woman in the colorful dress clearly had a keen interest in the Dragon Spirit Pearl, and she would never easily let it go. With that, it seemed there was no further conversation to be had. Swish. It was as if a sudden chill appeared, and an icy figure, like a ghost, appeared before the woman in the colorful dress. A long sword imbued with extreme cold energy was thrust out with great force. The cold air, enough to freeze the very air itself, rushed toward the woman. However, she remained motionless. When the sword, bearing the cold energy, was just inches away from her, a colorful snake's tail swung through the air and struck the icy sword with tremendous force. Immediately, the cold energy shattered, and even the sword formed of ice was reduced to frozen shards. The frost spirit puppet was also hit hard, flung backward. Its feet scraped long marks on the ground before it managed to stabilize itself. Lin Jing watched the scene unfold, her eyes narrowing, and for the first time, a serious expression appeared on her face. She looked at the woman in the colorful dress and saw a small snake of 7 vibrant colors coiled on the woman's shoulder. The snake's tongue flickered in and out, and its tiny mouth seemed like a dark abyss capable of swallowing the heavens and earth. This little snake was extraordinary. Lin Jing immediately recognized the immense power contained within this 7-colored snake. In fact, it might even be stronger than her frost spirit puppet. This made Lin Jing mutter to herself, wondering where this woman had come from. Her skills and background seemed to surpass even Su Qingyi's, but she had never heard of anyone like her on the Tianluo continent, according to Mu Chun. Though surprised by the woman's strength, Lin Jing was of a noble status as the little princess of the martial realm. If she couldn't even protect the Dragon Spirit Pearl she coveted, that would be truly embarrassing. Thus, Lin Jing quickly composed herself, concealing her shock. Without a word, she reached out and removed a jade bangle from her slender wrist. Boom. The moment the bangle was removed, the spiritual energy within Lin Jing surged as if released from its suppression, and it erupted like a storm, sweeping through the heavens and earth. The powerful pressure of her spiritual energy pushed the surrounding poisonous mist aside in layers. Peak ninth grade. The woman in the colorful dress felt the overwhelming spiritual energy pressure and couldn't help but raise an eyebrow. The mysterious girl before her was certainly full of surprises. It seemed that obtaining the dragon spirit pearl would not be as easy as she had imagined. With that thought, the woman in the colorful dress no longer hid her strength. She took a delicate step forward, and immediately, the space around her shook. The powerful spiritual energy surge shot into the sky, matching Lin Jing's strength, showing that her power was not inferior. Another peak ninth grade. If any outsider had witnessed this scene, they would have been utterly stunned. Normally, someone at peak ninth grade would rank in the top 4 on the strongest list of the Tianluo continent. But these two women were not among the top 4. Lin Jing gazed at the astonishing display of spiritual energy from the woman in the colorful dress and gently pressed her lips together. Her jade hand clenched, and a jade tablet appeared, which she swiftly crushed. The jade shard shattered, and without any hesitation, Lin Jing pressed her jade foot down. Her delicate figure surged with overwhelming spiritual energy as she swept directly toward the colorful skirt woman. The very moment Lin Jing crushed the jade shard, Chen, who had been refining the wind god fan on the secluded stone island, suddenly opened his eyes. With a clenched hand, a jade shard appeared in his grasp, and at the same time, Lin Jing's voice echoed from it. Chen, I've run into a troublesome person. Hurry up and come help me beat her up.